So, I right now would like to talk briefly about a fiction writing concept that I've seen be very helpful to new novelists, new short story writers, people that have been writing fiction. I used to teach this when I taught creative writing a long time ago at this point. But it was really important for me, especially when it came to a problem that a lot of new, young, and even intermediate fiction writers a problem that they run into, and that's the problem of certain scenes falling flat or certain events not really landing or certain parts of a book or a story feeling very boring. There's a lot of potential problems with that can cause those sorts of feelings or those sorts of sensations in a reader. And I can talk at length about those, but one of the, I think, most fundamental is whether or not the scene adds to the story or detracts from the story. Like, what is the scene effectively doing to provide a hook or a vehicle for the reader to get super interested or super invested in either the plot or the character? Um, I'll give you a specific example of what I mean. There are some scenes in newbie writing, especially fiction writing, where the writer wrote that scene where not a whole lot happens, but most of the action takes place in the character's mind. And the whole reason that happens is just so that the writer can dump a bunch of information that they think the reader needs to know. But we know from good writing that the best way to gradually expose tensions and expose conflicts and expose the interiority of a character's mind and experience is through actually having them interact with the world around them. We sort of, when I was getting my MFA, we disparagingly called a lot of these scenes bathroom mirror scenes, because at least once every class, and oftentimes 10 times per semester, we would get a student who would write a story where the only action in the story was them sighing and then going and looking into the bathroom mirror and having this long monologue with just information being dumped from their head and all they're feeling, and nothing is actually happening in the story. It's really, the whole scene exists to basically be a life support system for the info, and that's just bad writing. And so, any new writer sort of needs to be conscientious of that. They need to be aware that that's a thing that can happen. And so, if you have a story where that's basically what's happening, there are some easy ways to fix that. And I'll get to a few suggestions that I have, but the concept that will really help you with that and help you avoid it in the future is a concept that I learned when I was getting my first degree, which is kernel scenes and satellite scenes. Like kernel, like a popcorn kernel, and satellites, like a thing that orbits a thing. But I don't know why a satellite would orbit around a popcorn kernel. That's besides the point. A kernel scene is a scene where if you actually looked at the string of your story and all of the events on that story were like a bead on that string, what events could you take away and have it not change the story, have it not change the plot? Versus which events, like which beads on the string, could you remove and it would completely change the story? I was talking to my wife about this, and she came up with the idea like Twister, like the movie Twister. And I said, okay, just think about things that happen in the movie Twister. Well, the climactic moment in the movie Twister, spoilers by the way, is that they're trying to get these, floating sensors into a tornado. And you go, okay, well, you need the vehicle to actually release these pods into a tornado. So, you have to have the climactic event where the pods actually get into the tornado. So you need a climactic moment like that. So that's one kernel scene in that story. But then you think, oh, okay, well, in order to do that, we need to have some explanation, some scene that builds up to or builds tension for that big release. So you might have three of these machines, and to add additional tension, you say, okay, there's a reason why there's only three of these machines. I forget the movie Twister and all the details. I'm just extrapolating from here to prove a point. And so you go, okay, well then we need to have like in order to build tension to a climax, we need to have like this moment where pods get released but it fails, this moment where things get a little closer and things fail, and then ultimately then that builds up to the climactic moment because you're down to the last thing and like this is the last chance that we have to actually release the pods into the tornado. And you go, okay, well, all of a sudden this plot now has 3 kernel scenes based on one event, one detail. But you can extrapolate further because then you also come back out from those 3 kernel scenes and you go, okay, well, we need a scene to explain like how this person got these machines, like who these people are that are doing this. And also like at the end of the climax, like they're in a tornado. Is it dangerous? Well, you potentially would need to have a scene following that where the people get shelter after they release the pods into the tornado. So like all of a sudden, just from a single scene, you can extrapolate pretty much the entire plot of the movie Twister. But how many people remember the moment like, you know, shortly after the beginning where I don't know, there's just like random character interaction? Well, that would be a satellite. That's a scene where it's like you can remove it and replace it with something else, and the movie Twister would still be the movie Twister. All the kernels would still be there. But the satellite, what that does is it allows people to get more invested and more interested in the characters, and also understand the stakes, like the conflicts, the tensions that are involved in what they are trying to do and why they're trying to do it. You know, these satellite scenes, what they do is they serve to emphasize or gradualize or intensify the kernel scenes. And the kernel scenes, you know, if you just think of a single kernel scene, you can sort of extrapolate like, okay, these are the things that need to happen. Now, a lot of bad writing, what happens is when you start a project, a short story or a novel, you're just sort of feeling stuff out. Like you don't really have a sense of what your kernel scenes are yet. Like you might have like something like in the climax, or you know, something that leads up to a climax. You know, if man and woman get married, or man and man get married, or girl and girl get married, or other non-binary get married, whatever. It's 2023. You know, if that's a kernel scene, then you go like, okay, well, if that's the climax, then we need to have some, you know, moments before then that lead up to that. You know, some piece of drama that might split them apart. A moment before that about like them coming together, the meeting. Like you can just back out and sort of like extrapolate all these different kernel scenes from a single moment. But the problem is that a lot of people don't think like that. And so what ends up happening is that they will start their story or start their novel with something that isn't a kernel scene. They'll start the tension, they'll start the moments of their book or their story, and it will just be like, this is what this person is, this is what this person does. And also here are his thoughts and all, you know, also his anxieties and things like that. And that's boring. It's super boring because it doesn't actually move the plot forward. It doesn't even initiate the plot. It doesn't allow anybody to like care about a person, a character, like what they want, what they yearn for, and it doesn't allow for that scene to sort of build off of another, off of another, off of another, to allow tension to flourish in the story. And tension and conflict it's pretty necessary to make somebody invest the time to read a 270 to 300 page novel. It's also necessary to make somebody read a 20-page short story, but you can obviously get away with less. And so the key concept here is kernels and satellites, which is if you just laid out, like in a row, every scene in your story, what are the kernels and what are the satellites, and strategically, are the kernels occurring where they need to occur? Like, what's going to have a bearing on the kernel events later? Like, extrapolate, as I did with the movie Twister. Like, okay, if this happens, what's going to happen after that? And after that, and after that. And then you can also, once you arrive at a final point, you can sort of forget the path that you took and go, okay, well, if this happens, what can I extrapolate from this climactic moment? And then sort of work backwards, and you can realize at that moment, like, oh, maybe another path into this climax would have been better. And then what that allows you to do is sort of think like, okay, well, I can rejigger this scene, I can amplify this conflict, I can change this interaction to all of a sudden, well, this is now a kernel moment. Like, if I removed this, the plot does not work. And just going back to what I was saying earlier, those sort of like bathroom mirror scenes, like that can be anything. That can be you talking in a car, that can be like a person like sitting in a driveway. Like there's no conflict, there's no tension there because it's just info dumping. And so, what I would recommend to any new writer is if you find in your story or your novel that you have a sort of bathroom mirror scene, something that's not serving as a kernel for a plot, something that's not serving as like a fundamental piece of the narrative tension that needs to build towards a climax. And of course, we live in a literary world, so like climaxes can be subdued. I'm speaking in broad strokes. What was I saying? Anyway, what you can do is with this bathroom mirror scene is just take some of that internal struggle and put it into another person that intrudes. I forget who said it, but was it Gardner? It might have been Gardner who said that there are only two plots in the world: a stranger comes to town, or a person goes on an adventure. And so, the simplest way to create conflict in a bathroom mirror scene, where you need somebody to like understand who a person is just have a stranger come to town. Have have something happen. Have a person come in. It could be a sister who is having difficulties, just anything to add tension and to allow you to gradually and evolutionarily reveal details about a person through that interaction rather than just being like, here, reader, here are all the details. And ultimately, this is going to allow you to show rather than tell, and that's going to improve your writing as well. Anyway, that's kernels and satellites and all that fun stuff. And yeah, so hopefully this video helps any aspiring creative writers. Yeah, good luck.